Right. Good morning. Thank y'all so much for joining us. We are going to be kicking off our webinar with one in our series, the TIA Deep Dive with Strive. And today's topic is using analysis to identify needs. So thank y'all so much for being with us this morning for TIA Tuesday, as I like to call it. Also, happy Veterans Day to all of those who have served. We're very grateful for your service. My name is Dr. Allison Ross. I'll be moderating today, and you're going to be joined with the wisdom and knowledge of the Paige Parker on all things TIA. Paige is our senior specialist for training and implementation. Also contributing to this is our senior product manager, Shanna James, who is not with us on the call today, but we can also relay questions and love notes if need be. Speaking of messages and questions and things, this webinar is being recorded, and since you're here, you signed up, you're going to receive the link we're about 48 hours after broadcast. If you'd like to check out this webinar or the other webinars in the series, or just other things that are entertaining with all things Eduphoria, check out our YouTube at youtube.com/Eduphoria videos. If you have a question, please use the Q&A window. I know it's so tempting to use the chat, but Q&A helps us capture those questions and take them back so we can use them and think about them and about what was asked and what do our clients need. So please use the Q&A window for your questions. For shout outs, hey-heys, and things like that, go ahead and use the chat feature for that. And if you have any questions bubble up after this, reach out to training@eduphoria.net. Today's agenda is we're going to be monitoring the process and looking for skew. And then taking that, and whenever we have that information, we have a really nice snapshot of what that is. We're going to talk about reacting and planning based on data. Then we're going to be thinking about our student growth as well as to teacher performance, and then culminating in making the data available for reporting. So without further ado, Paige Parker, please tell us all about TIA Deep Dive with our analysis.
Well, good morning, and thank you for the introduction, and hope everybody's having a good day today. We are going to get started by talking about detailed analysis, and detailed analysis can be used for a variety of different purposes. We're going to be talking about monitoring your process, looking for skew, and using it in a variety of ways to look for different kinds of skew, and what do we do with that data afterwards. So I'm going to start in the slides, but then I'm going to jump over to the live application so I can show you how this actually works. But I wanted to show a slide first because on the slides, you'll notice that there is a link at the bottom to an article in our online help guide or our knowledge base that will give you more details about what we're talking about here. You're going to get these slides when you get that link to the recording, which is the email that comes out about, as Allison said, about 48 hours after the session. And so you will have these slides and you will have these links to all the things that we're going to be talking about today. So with that said, I'm going to jump over into the live application. So I'm in Strive and I'm going to go over to the left navigation. If yours is collapsed and you can't remember what the difference between that square and that square and that square and that square, like I sometimes can't, you can either float your mouse over those to see what they are, or you can expand down at the bottom with that caret. This just allows you to get things out of your way so that you have more space on the page where you're looking at the data if you don't need it, and then, open it up if you do need it. So I'm going to go to detailed analysis, which is the one that looks like a bar chart. If it's collapsed, it's up here, looks like a bar graph, and float over and it says detailed analysis. So that's where I'm going to go. On this first page, I'm going to make some selections because I went in earlier and made sure I had data. Mine have saved those selections from the last time I was here, but you're going to be going in and out and looking at different things, so you may have to make those choices. You're always going to want to select the framework that your district is using. So my district is using the V2, which is regular t-test language, but the locked framework. Your district may be using that, or you may be using the alternative domain 1 if everyone in your district is using high quality instructional materials and lesson internalization language. Or you may still have the original t-test that does not say V2, and that might be what you're using now. That is something to be thinking about through, not to change now because changing midstream is not a good idea, but at the end of the year, you may want to move over to the V2 locked or the Alt D1 locked. We are recommending those for data security, and those are the ones that we are supporting going forward with templates and things like that. Okay, so I picked my framework. I'm looking at observations on detailed analysis now because it's that time of year. We've got those cranking up. I have selected my current year. I can come over here and pick either current year. I can look at last year's data. I can look at 2 years to compare, or I can make a custom date range if I only want to see the observations that have been done since a specific date. I can set that and make my own custom date range. I can also choose what I want to look at. So across the top, I want to see dimensions because I'm looking at dimensions as my measure, especially for TIA. They don't ever ask you for domain averages. They only ask you for those 8 dimension ratings. So that's what I want to be looking at. I'm going to start by looking at my appraisees, which is my teachers, but I have all of these choices and we're going to move into some of those other ones in just a few minutes. And then on my view, I usually like to start with the table. That is a personal preference. Some people like to look at the graph first. For me, the graph makes more sense if I've looked at the table first. So that's where I'm going to start, but that's entirely up to you when you go in to look at your own data. And then I'm going to click the create button, and it's going to take just a minute because I've got quite a few in there. The length of time depends on how many your district has done and how much has to be processed. So this is showing me all of my teachers in a list over here on the left. It's showing me the dimensions across the top. I did not set up a group for this particular view, but I can, because it's dynamic, I can change that at any point. So I could say, I want to group them by schools. And if I do that, then it's going to show me the name of the campus and then all of the teachers that belong to that campus. And then it's going to give me the total of documents that have been done at that campus and the averages for each dimension. All of these teachers averaged together gives me that average for the campus. So I can scroll through and see my different campuses that way, if that's helpful. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. In this case, I'm going to turn off the group. Where's my group? There we go. I'm going to turn off my group because I just want to see the big list of names. So I want to talk about what we would do with this data. If I'm looking at the teacher list, how is this going to help me? Well, for one thing, I'm going to look at number of documents over here. In the process for my demo district, teachers get 2 observations. That may not be the case in your district. You may just have one. So if you saw a 2, you might be thinking, what's up with that? I'm not worried about the 2s, but when I scroll down a little bit further, I'm going to see some 3s here, and I'm going to wonder about these 3s. Why do they have more than the 2 that are required? It could possibly be because they asked for an additional observation because they were disputing one. I'm not sure. But the other thing that makes me suspicious is I have 3, but not everything is a decimal point. It's rare that you would have that many exact same numbers from, on 3 different documents. So I'm going to dig in a little bit deeper. I can click on a teacher's name. I can see the 3 that were done, the dates, who did them, and then I can scroll over and see, here's why I'm seeing those numbers that are not decimals, because a lot of them don't have ratings. And so I'm going to say probably these first 2 are what I would call false starts. Somebody went in, maybe they were interrupted, maybe they went back and they did this one, but they never deleted those 2 out. So probably those 2 need to be deleted because they were never completed, or they need to be finished out, one or the other, but they don't need to be left the way they are. So those are the kinds of things when I go in, and I can go back to the whole list by clicking this back button. When I go in and I look at my list of teachers, I'm going to be looking for anomalies in the number of documents. I'm going to be looking for blanks over here, and I may find some. I don't know if since I have so many, I don't know. Oh, yep. So I do have some that are actually blank right here. And so I would want to come over and see, all right, Sienna only has 1 done and it is not completely done. So I might want to go in and find that appraiser and talk to them and say, hey, do you have that information and you just haven't filled it in, or what's going on there? So either delete that document out because it's not completed or get it finished. So this is really more of a process check. I'm monitoring my evaluation process overall to see how many documents are being done, to see if we have blanks, if we have extra documents that need to be deleted, just kind of looking at those things and looking at the process overall. I can also change this to be information about the appraiser. So I can go up to the top and say, instead of appraisees in my rows, I want to see appraisers. So it's going to average together all of the documents that were done by each principal or assistant principal. And so I can see here, I've got a couple people in here. I've got a lot of appraisers because this is a demo district. But I also have, and this is all my campuses together. I'm looking at every campus. I don't have them broken down by campus. And I do have some that only have one. These might be my district level people who were brought in to do that second observation when something was disputed. So I can see how many documents each of them have done. If this is like a regular principal, I might wonder why they've only done one so far. This one's only done 8, where everybody else is in the double digits. Maybe that's because they're at a smaller campus, and so they don't have as many to get started on. But I can look at that kind of information about the progress that's being made by those appraisers. And then I can also see the averages over here of all of those documents they have done averaged together. And I can see some differences between the numbers, but it's hard for me to wrap my head around what those differences are when there's so many and so much. So one thing I can do is narrow it down to just the 8 dimensions that I'm concerned about for TIA. I could go to the domains filter up here and say I only want to look at instruction and learning environment, which is domains 2 and 3. That's going to narrow it down to just dimensions 2.1 through 3.3, which are the ones that are going to be reported to TIA. So now I'm seeing just that information that I am most concerned about right now. Still, it's hard for me to tell looking at these, it's hard for me to compare all of this information in one place. So I can change my view from the table score view to the graph percent view. And this is going to give me still my list of appraisers, but it's going to give me a graph for each dimension of how many, so of these 11, 36% were accomplished, 55% were proficient, and only 9% were developing. So I can see the actual numbers and I can see how those compare. Statistically speaking, with any valid instrument, and t-test has been shown to be a valid instrument, I should be seeing something that is closer to a bell curve. I should be seeing a little bit of the black, which is distinguished, a little bit larger amount of blue, which is accomplished. My largest amount in the middle should be the plum color, proficient. I should have a small amount of developing and a smaller amount of improvement needed. I should probably, statistically speaking, again, there are reasons why it wouldn't be exactly like that. But in general, that's what I should be seeing, a little bit of all 5. And with the plum color being the largest in the middle, that would be the highest point of my bell. I am not seeing a bell here. I am seeing a lot of the top end. I'm seeing no improvement needed. And to confirm that, I could click on improvement needed and it would collapse everything but that. And I could scroll over and say, do we have anywhere in my district? I don't know that I can believe that there's no improvement needed anywhere in my district, but that's what the data is telling me here. And so I'm going to question that in terms of the data that's coming in. I could also say how much developing do we have? Even that is a really small amount, and in some dimensions, none at all. And this is again, we're looking at each appraiser and what they have done with the ratings. So I can go in and look at one thing at a time, or if I just click back on that one, it will show me all of my colors again so that I can see the whole chart. So what does it tell me if I'm not seeing that bell shape? The first thing it tells me is that we may not be aligned to the rubric itself. We may not be applying the descriptors in the rubric the way they were written. So I would want to do some activities with those appraisers to say, what does it really mean to be accomplished? So are 40% of your teachers accomplished in these areas if you look at what that, it has to be this in order to say it's accomplished. Because they may say most or all or almost all. You have to look at exactly what those descriptors mean and kind of dig into the language. And so sometimes that helps align those principles with the rubric so that we start seeing that bell curve a little bit more, or that shape with a little on either end and the largest amount being proficient in the middle. The other thing this tells me is that they're not aligned to each other, because even though I'm not getting a bell shape, I'm not getting the same shape from appraiser to appraiser. So even if they are misunderstanding what the language is, they're still not applying it the same way. Um, Again, if we have the similar groups of people. So sometimes the data is different because one principal got all of the veteran teachers. And so I might expect them to have more on the high end. Or one principal got all of the first year teachers, and I might expect them to have very little on the high end. But if all things are equal in terms of who they're evaluating, I would expect to see the shapes to be similar if they're aligned to each other, and that shape to be more like a bell curve if they're aligned to the rubric. So looking at this data and looking at each one of those different dimensions, I can see all the differences, not just them not being a bell, but also not being the same from appraiser to appraiser. So this tells me I probably need to do some calibration activities, and some of them need to be calibrating to the rubric itself and talking about what that language actually means. And then some of those activities need to be putting that in practice and having all of us evaluate the same lesson and see if we get the same ratings after we have talked about what those ratings actually mean. So this is going to be a signal to me that I need to arrange for some of that calibration work to happen. There are lots of ways that you can do the calibration work. Um, in Calibration doesn't necessarily live in Eduphoria. You can go to the Teach for Texas website, and they have some videos out there that show you a lesson, and everybody can watch the lesson together and do the evaluations. And then they even provide a key that tells you what the state says those ratings should be. And you can compare what your principals did both to each other and to what the state says is the accurate rating for those lessons. That can be done completely outside the system. Some districts will create a user, a teacher named calibration teacher, and when a group of principals goes and does a, a calibration observation, they all log in to and assign it to that calibration teacher so that they can collect the data in Eduphoria without assigning that appraisal to an individual teacher. Because if you've ever been in the classroom when a whole group of adults walks in, it's not the same. It is somewhat of a disruption, and the kids answering questions and things like that is different than it would be in a regular classroom. So I wouldn't want to count that against the teacher, but I can still collect the data and I can observe Miss Parker's classroom while logging it in the system under calibration teacher so that it's not counting against that person. If your district uses Active Directory to create your user accounts, they would have to set that up for you, or it will get erased overnight. But that's one way that districts can take advantage of looking at that data here. I could go in and look at one teacher. This is calibration teacher, and I could look at just their information, but it would be coming from all those different appraisers. Okay, so I'm still looking at appraisers in my list here. Maybe I want to change that. Maybe I want to look now at some of the other things that we need to evaluate for Skew. So for my rows, where's my rows? For my rows, I am going to change it to subjects. Now, I am not going to have great data here. Yeah, because mine were imported, they're not set. What you will have is math, science, social studies, language arts, reading. You'll have all of those subjects that the appraisers can choose from. What I would want to make sure when I look here is that they should not be not set. So I would want to go in and talk to those principals about getting those subject areas set in the data. Um, and also making sure that they're using them the way I want them to be used. Let me switch over to summatives maybe from last year. I won't have as much. Won't have any from this year. Let me look at last year. Oof. I'm sorry, I don't have good data in here at all. Maybe a little better on walkthroughs, hopefully. But it should be a list of your subjects there. And one of them is going to be not set if the appraiser forgot to select that. That's a thing they do when they first start the document. There's also one that's called Other, and I would want to make sure that everyone, all of my appraisers know what are we using Other for. Okay, so this is a little bit better. I can see some of them. I don't have any that are assigned to Other in my demo data, but I would want to make sure that we're not, maybe we're telling principals we're not using Other at all. So make sure you choose one of the selections, but don't choose Other. Or maybe we're saying Other is for something specific. You could tell them what that should be. There's also going to be one in the list for CTE. There's going to be one called electives, and there's going to be one called art. So art classes do they go in art? Do they go in electives? They are an elective class, but they're also art. So having that clarified for your principals, what are we counting as electives? What are we counting as CTE? What are we counting as arts? And what are we counting as other? And then all of the others are pretty cut and dried, but you want to make sure that they know and that they're putting that data in. And then I would want to come in and see, okay, who forgot to click and select? I could come in and look at this one and see subject is not set. I can see who the appraiser is, and I can say who the teacher was and have them go in and make that correction. So I can look at that data again by subject area, and also, are we aligned by subject area? This is really not great data here because I only have one of each. If I go back to observations current year, um, again, I'm not seeing any differences here, but if I did have all my subjects showing, are they all aligned? Or are we giving higher marks in the tested subjects? Or maybe we're giving higher marks in the elective subjects because we're not worried about them. They're not in our program yet or whatever. We're just going to give them a rating and move on. That's really not fair to the teachers, and it's going to be harder for them when we do start looking at them for TIA. So are we aligned across subject areas? And then I'd also want to come up here and change it to be grade levels. Are we aligned by grade level? And this is really, again, I don't have great data for, let me look at last year's and see if I have any better data here. I do not. I don't know that I have anything on summatives either. Um, but the grade level data is going to be more helpful at elementary, really through eighth grade, elementary and middle school. Most classes are by grade level, and so you'll have those grade levels aligned. At the high school level, you may have some that say ninth, 10th, 11th, or 12th, but truly, they're usually mixed classes, and so there is a grade option for secondary, and that's where most of your high school classes will be. But if I had data that showed me that I have like super high marks in third grade, way higher than first or second or fourth or fifth. I have all of my teachers in third grade are getting mostly distinguished and accomplished. What does that tell me? It could tell me that the appraiser who's doing that grade level is being overly generous with the rubric or not applying the rubric as written. And so our calibration activities may take care of that. But if that's not the case, if that really is where all of our truly outstanding teachers are, then what could I do with that information? It may be unpopular opinion that I want to spread those teachers out so that I have a truly outstanding teacher at each grade level to be a leader on that grade level team. So I can look at those and see if this is true data. What does that tell me about my other grade levels or about how I want to change things to make improvements in other areas? So again, I can look at it by grade level. I can look at it by subject area. I have all of these choices that I can look at and see different information. We've looked at appraisers, appraisees, grade levels, and subject areas. probably appraisee types you won't need because um, it's everybody's going to be in that same appraisee type. All of your teachers will be in one group, but you might want to look at year. So I could go in and say I can set my custom. Um, I don't have data to look at that way. If I could set my custom date range for the last 3 years, 2 years is already given to me, but I could do the last 3 years, and then it would show me the averages and what year they came from. So that's another way that you can look at that data and see how are things going over time. Okay, any questions about the different views or ways to look at calibration? Any questions in the
We do have under other, can the appraiser type in what subject they're observing?
not in the other box, but on all of the boxes when anybody goes in to do a document on a teacher, I'm going to come over here and click, say I'm going to start a document over here. I'm going to start a new observation. If I choose other as the subject, it doesn't let me type anything here, but I do have an additional information category where I could say this is what the other means. So I could put it here if I've chosen other up here. And the same is true if I choose secondary and it's, let's say it is, I'm going to say secondary math, but I could come down here and say it's algebra 1. And that will tell me a little bit more than just secondary math. So I want my principals to know how I want them to be using secondary or early elementary or pre-K. And I want them to know how we want them to be using. This is the full list of the choices. So for electives, are they picking career and tech, other, arts, PE, or elective? How are we wanting them to apply those? And special ed would be another one I would want to make sure that we know which courses we want to count under special ed. So they need some guidance here. And then once they've made that choice, they can give additional information here. And this field does show up in reporting, so that you'll be able to see exactly where that information came from.
A follow-up to that is, can the additional information category be exported into the TIA custom report?
It is not a field in the custom report, in the custom TIA report. So the answer is yes and no. It would show up if I go to reports and I go to document analysis, it will show up in this report, and I could then merge that into the TIA report if I wanted to, but I would be able to get that additional information column by using this document analysis.
We also had some interest on how to set up the calibration teacher, as well as we've had some folks that have asked about saying that they're not getting the right data, wondering about the t-test versus t-test v2. For those that are looking for those like specific pieces with their domains, definitely reach out to support@eduphoria.net so that we can take a look at your system, because those are, it would mean we'd have to go into each system and take a look at how your data is being fed. But for calibration teacher, Paige, do you have like a quick
Sure, I will
overview of
show
what
you
that looks like?
quickly. If I go over to the management application, and you guys may or may not be the person in your district who can do this. This may be something that you need to take to another team member who has the system management access. But if I can go into management and I can go to users, I could create a new user here and call it calibration teacher, and I could make it, put it at a school or I could put it at the district level. It doesn't really matter as long as I'm going to be able to see the data. I do know some districts who have done a calibration teacher at each campus so that they can keep track of where that data was coming from when they did the observation. And some that just do one so that they can see, okay, we all saw a lesson and we all evaluated it, and these are the differences. So that's up to you whether you have one or more. If I create it here, that's great, but if I come over to security, I'm going to look in this district. Right now, my demo district is not using Active Directory Sync. So this will create and delete accounts that aren't officially in my district. So the one that I just made, if this was turned on, it would get deleted overnight. So you need to talk to your district folks and find out if you're using Active Directory. If you are, then your Active Directory team needs to create that user rather than you creating it over here. So if you're not using Active Directory and it's not going to get deleted out, then you could come over here and say you want to create a new user. But if you are using Active Directory and it is going to get deleted, then you would need them to create that user so that it doesn't get wiped out. Again, this may be out of your lane, so just take that information back to your district, and we do have articles about that in our online help guide.
Right, that's all the questions I see there.
All
And I put that
right.
email address in the chat for those that are needing that second look at their data.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Okay, so let's talk about we've talked about detailed analysis, which lets you look at the data in a variety of different ways. We also have a feature called document summary, which is trend analysis. So the differences between document summary and detailed analysis is in one way, detailed analysis looks at anything that is an observation that is in this framework. So I might have multiple things showing up in here if I use different documents. Not something I recommend using different documents because it can split your data in certain places, but this is not looking at a specific document, it's looking at a document type, and it's also looking at a question type. So only documents that use matrix questions, those radio buttons where you choose either distinguished, accomplished, proficient, or you choose observed, not observed, whatever. If it has those radio buttons, it will show up in detailed analysis. If it uses checkboxes, all of them will show up in document summary, but if it uses checkboxes, it will only show up in document summary. So I'm going to look at a couple here that I like to use. One is the post-observation conference document. If you are using that as a separate document and you come in here and click create, you're going to see how many have been done, how many staff members. Sometimes you have those don't match exactly. Somebody got a second one or somebody didn't get one, but you'll be able to see the difference up here. This is going to be a summary of all of those 26 together. So as a larger district comes in and they have 1,000, it's going to be a summary of those 1,000. I could, if I'm at the district level, narrow it down to a specific campus or a group of campuses. If I'm an assistant principal who's responsible for a feeder pattern, I can pick all of my feeder schools and look at the data for those. A building principal will only see their own campus, so they won't see the whole district. But what this tells me is from that post-observation document, I selected, or my appraisers selected, an area of reinforcement and an area of refinement for each teacher based on that observation and what we saw. So what are the results of that? Well, nobody got tagged in content knowledge and expertise. So we don't seem to have a concern about that. Let me see if we did down here. Nope, we didn't down here either. So that seems to be something we're not worried about. We're not assigning that as an area for teachers to work on. What are the areas that we had them work on the most? Data and assessment is one out of reinforcement, and then also for refinement. So that is an area for both groups. That's something that I may want to take note of. What can I do about that? Well, what professional learning do we have planned, or what plans are we making? Can we include data and assessment in there? Are our instructional coaches working with our teachers on data? Can we talk to them about what we're seeing in those observations and try to get some more support for teachers there? So I can look at this data and see what is trending across my campus, or in this case, my district, as things that are being identified as needing work. And then what can I do about that in terms of providing support? What do we have already that I can recommend? What can we plan for the future? So this gives me good information to help me react to what is coming in and make plans for addressing it. I can always look at those individual dimensions and look at the numbers and see what our highest and lowest are in detailed analysis. But then when I come over here and look at the trends of what are we specifically saying in those post-conference meetings that teachers need to work on, that's what we're seeing here. I can also go and look at a different document. I can look at, I'm going to go back to my configuration, and I'm going to go to walkthroughs. And I want to pick this this one down here, it tells me it's a checklist and rating. That's the format. And this one is actually in our community if you're interested in seeing what it looks like as a document. But what this one does is at the top, it gives me the look fors for domain 2 and then ratings for domain 2. So I'm going to identify what did I see and have the ability to make some comments about that. And then I'm going to give ratings. So I can come over here and look and see what the ratings are. But let's say for 2.2, I'm looking at pretty high accomplished, you know, nothing indistinguished, but a pretty high accomplished and proficient. But when I come up to 2.2 and look at what was observed in the classroom, objectives and other things tied to the other disciplines was only observed once out of 13. So 8% of the time. Anticipates misunderstandings was only identified 30% of the time. Higher order thinking skills was up there, which is probably why I'm seeing these higher ratings. But I do have two look fors here that are not as high as the other one in that same dimension. So that gives me a little more information about what does this rating actually mean. It means we're really high in this area, but not so much in these two. So we still have some work to do there. And then that may change our overall ratings down here. So it just gives me a little more detail by having those check boxes there, which also gives the teachers a little more feedback about why did I get proficient. Well, I would have these things checked or not checked as being observed while the appraiser was in the classroom. And then again, domain 3, same thing. I saw a lot of procedures and routines, so I would expect a pretty high rating down here for 3.1 based on that. But maybe I didn't see as much of the management and the safety, and that's why this is not quite as high. So I can kind of look at this information to inform why these ratings are the way they are. And that will help me have a little more information about what I need to do about it. It's broken down to smaller pieces that I can identify as having specific needs. These are pretty close together on here, all except for 3.1. But these show me some areas that definitely are observed less often and possibly need some conversations at least. So this is trend analysis. It's going to pull in both checkbox questions and ratings questions, but it's not going to be, this is not separated out by appraiser or by any other group. This is everybody. So when I'm looking at these numbers, it's however many documents I have, that's what's going into my ratings down here. So I'm seeing more summary. Again, that's why it's called document summary. I'm looking at only one particular document. So just this one walkthrough form is all I'm looking at right now. I can narrow it down and use these filters to look at some of these things a little more specifically. I could go in and say how many of these are, let's say language arts. I don't know what that's going to do to my numbers. Oh, only one. So I can kind of break it down a little bit further if I want to by using any of these filters. Again, at the district level, I can filter by school or schools because I can check more than one. But at the campus level, those principals will only be able to see their own school. So they'll have the button, but it won't do anything because they can't look at any school other than their own. And if I did want to see this data in a table view, I can go up to summary and I can look at it over here if you are a table person. This one is not as helpful to me because on check boxes, it displays as yes or no. So that's just for me looking at it, it's kind of a lot of noise. It's hard for me to determine what that actually means. But if I wanted to drill down, I could, and I could even drill down and look at somebody's specific document. So I can drill all the way down to the documents that came into this list. So document summary is great for, and I can look at all the different kinds of whatever I have in here. Once I select the type, then I'm going to select the specific document. And then I'm going to look at the data that way. Again, this is going to be everybody in my district. It's going to be the observation document that we looked at under detailed analysis. It looks a little bit different here because I don't have a list here of teachers or appraisers. I'm just looking at the dimensions themselves and what those ratings were. So if you want to see it summarized this way, document summary gives you everybody all together in one group if you want to. I could do something similar to this. If I go back to detailed analysis and I say I want to look at observations, um, but I want how am I going to do this? I want to do my rows as the dimensions, and I want to do my columns as the totals. We'll see. I think this will give me what I'm looking for. So this is not going to have people's names. It's going to have those standards. It's going to have the total number and then the average over here. So I can get that information in a variety of ways, but the document summary to me is a nice way to get a visual and to see what the trends are in my district. One thing I did not mention previously is that you can save a view. So this is especially helpful in detailed analysis where you have all these choices to make. When I create that information, I come over here and I'm saying, oh, I probably don't want to leave that. I want to look at appraisers probably most of the time and dimensions most of the time. But I do want to narrow it down to just my instructional domains, 2.1 through 3.3. I want to be able to come back and look at this data again and again. I know this is a view I'm going to want to see. I can save that view. So I can click this little ribbon. I can say I want to save the current filter, and then I can give it a name. Now I already have mine. Um, Actually, these are not, I don't have one that's like this. So I'm going to say TIA, it's going to be all appraisers. 2.1 through 3.3. So I can save that. And then the next time I come in, maybe this is not the view I want to see. I can click on that ribbon and I can say, I want to look at it by campus now and just apply the campus view. So you can change and save those views however you want to. Um, this is the one I just saved. I can go back to that one. So I can go in and apply views and keep them so that I don't have to remember, okay, what were all these settings that I put up there? So that's kind of nice. I can also download that data into a spreadsheet. Just a caution, if you download it into a spreadsheet, you've got a snapshot, whereas this is live. So if I download it now and somebody does an observation in the next 30 minutes, this data is going to change because it's been updated by that new document that's come in. Okay, I'm going to talk about the correlation report. Um, the correlation report is going to give you, I'm going to come back over here for just a minute and look at the slides. So it's going to give you data that compares your teacher performance to your student growth. So you can analyze if they are aligned. What you hope to see is that as teachers are improving, students are improving. So as I want to see those ratings tied together. You can go in and apply specific filters to get that TIA data, and you can also look at it as a scatter plot or as a table. This is what I kind of wanted to talk about before I go in and look at it. So it's going to give you a correlation coefficient. The goal is to reflect a scenario where student growth increases as teacher observation scores increase, which means you want a positive correlation coefficient. That's what that means if students are coming up as teachers are coming up. So ideally, the data would be on a diagonal line from left to right, moving upward from left to right, bottom left to upper right, kind of clumped together, not if they're not going to be totally dot on dot aligned, but they would be clumped around that diagonal line. And then the goal is to have a positive 0.24 correlation, which means that it is correlated, but it's not a 100% because you're never going to get a 100% correlation. But this would be a positive number. That's sort of a goal for teachers to look for, districts to look for. So if I go back over to the system and I say I want to look at observation data, I can choose for my student growth and teacher correlation report, observation data or summative data. Here's the thing. There are two pieces that pull into this report. The teacher observation, which has probably happened now, and the student growth scores, which may not have happened yet. So if you have your student growth data from the pretest in the system, then you can run it mid-year with an observation. If you don't get your student growth information until the end of the year and put it at the system in the system, then you would be able to run it against your summatives at the end of the year. So you have to have both pieces. We're going to talk about the student growth piece in just a minute, but I'm going to show you what that data would look like when I bring it in. Mine is not a great scatter plot. Yours will probably be spread out a little bit further to the left and the right. But you'll see that I have some that are, they're kind of clumped together. The the goal is to have that plum color sort of in the middle. I know it's kind of hard to see the colors. This plum color is what I'm shooting for. That's going to be my lower single digits. That's the closest correlation. My coral color is where the student scores are significantly higher than the teacher evaluation scores. And then there's usually a dark blue color. That's probably the closest I have to it, where the teacher ratings are significantly higher than the student ratings. So those are my two separate colors. The student color is coral and the teacher color is navy blue. When they come together, they're this beautiful plum color that gives me a low single digit correlation number. So when I float over any of my dots, I can see who the teacher is, what their evaluation score is, and what their student score is as well. But right now, I'm not looking at just my TIA information. So I need to come up here and say, show me just learning environment and instruction. Now I'm looking at just dimensions 2.1 through 3.3. And when I come up here, I didn't mean to when I come up here and find who was the user I had just a minute ago. I don't know why it did this to me where I can't see the person up there, but I think it's this one. And it has changed those numbers just a little bit because we took out domains 1 and 4. Sometimes domain 1 will elevate teacher scores a little bit. So you want to make sure you're narrowing it down to just those totals that will count in TIA. And so I can do that comparison. I can also come down to the bottom and see who are the teachers where their score is significantly higher than their students, and who are the teachers where the student score is significantly higher than the teachers. I can see them just, it gives me my top 5 here, or I could just view all of them, all of the ones where the teacher score is higher, or all of the ones where the student score is higher. In this case, I have more where the student score is higher than I do where the teacher score is higher, which is unusual. But this is fake data, so that's why. I can also see my correlation coefficient in the upper right hand corner. Mine is a positive, but it's barely a positive. It's 0.09 instead of the number that we're shooting for, which is the 2.4. So it's not as high as I would like for it to be, but it is at least on the positive side. So I can see that information as well. And then if I wanted to, I could come up to the top and look at a table view that puts those two numbers side by side, my teacher's average, and again, I'm still looking at only domains 2 and 3, my teacher's average side by side with my student growth. Now, I don't have student growth in for all of my students. I have to scroll through and find the ones where there are scores, but it would compare those two, and then I could dig down into the teacher's data a little bit more. So again, this one will let you run observations or summatives, but you have to have the student data in there to compare it to. So depending on when you get your student data, when you have it in the system, you may be able to run it mid-year and look at observation data, or you may be waiting until the end of the year and looking at the summative data compared to your students. Any questions about the correlation report?
All is quiet on the Q&A front.
All right, so let's talk about how do we get that data in there. So there is a managed student growth location. This is where you're going to put your student growth information into the system, and it's going to pull into 3 places. It's going to pull into that correlation report. It's also going to pull into the TIA export. So you're going to want to have it there for both of those reasons. And then if you choose to display the student scores on the summative document, it would pull from here as well. You set that up on the template if you choose to do that, The one caution is that if your student data is not going to be there until after all of your teachers, teacher summatives have to be done 15 days before the end of school. If your student data is not going to be in by that time, then you might not want to display it on the summative document and make a change to that document after teachers have signed. If it's something you're considering, I would run that by legal and make sure that they're okay with that. But you can turn it on to display if you're going to have that data in time. And then this data can be added in by the district appraisal administrators or the campus level principals. So they both of those groups will have this manage student growth tab when they go in. There are three ways that you can enter. The first is to manually enter. So I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to go to my manage student growth tab, and I could come here and click and type in my numbers. If you're a smaller district and you have a small number of teachers who are qualifying for TIA, and that's what you're pulling this in for, you're not looking at every teacher, then this may be a valid way for you to enter that data. I can type a number and hit tab to move to my next section. I'm going to try to do math I can do in my head. So the next would be 38. Is that right? And then when I hit enter, it will take it. If I had said this was going to be 36, when I hit enter, it pops up with a note that tells me they must equal 100%. So I have to have numbers that equal 100%, and I have to have numbers in every column. So if you get data from another system and they only provide you with did not grow or met, they combine them already, you just put a 0 here. Because what the TIA report is going to do is combine these two. So 80 plus 0 equals 80. We're not changing anything by adding that 0 there, but it will require that you put all three in and that the three total 100. So that's one way, just typing the numbers in. The second way is by if you're using our student portfolios. So this is really just for those groups that are using portfolios, possibly to do SLOs or some other rubric-based model. But if I had a portfolio, I could go in, let me go find this teacher. I could click on these three little dots, say I want to import the portfolio. It's going to pop up with a list of portfolios that that teacher has. I only have one. Some teachers might have made a second one, but I'm going to make sure I have the right one. I can see that the students have been given their ratings. I could even preview that if I wanted to and see what it looks like and say, yep, that's the one. That's the rated one. Um, and then I could have imported it from right there, but I clicked too fast. And I can come back over here and click the import button right here. And it will bring those ratings in for that teacher right there. And then the third and final way that I can add data in is by importing. So if you are using any vendor to get testing results, you can get a spreadsheet. You have to include these. There are 8 columns in the template that you can download. So I can come over here and say, I want to import data. And I'm going to download a template here that will have these 8 fields. I have to have data in these 4. I cannot leave any of those 4 blank. These could be blank. It will find the teacher's name based on the email address, but I have to have these 4 in there. And then I would either drag and drop or choose the file and upload that information. Any teacher that had information in there, it would populate here as well. A couple of things. You don't include the percentage sign, so however you get your data, you just want it to be a number and not have the percent symbol in there. And then also, if they provide you only with did not meet and met, you're going to take that spreadsheet and add a column called exceeded and put zeros all the way down. Again, met plus exceeded equals met, so you're not changing the data, you're just making it fit our importer, and then you can import that information in. The data has to be here. It has to be imported or typed or whatever you're going to do before you can run that student growth teacher correlation report. Any questions in right now?